Good evening, and thank you for viewing the March 9th, 2021 meeting of the Arcata Planning Commission. We are holding this meeting as a webinar in response to local efforts to reduce the spread of the COVID-19 virus. I want to start by thanking the community and visitors to Arcata and the county for their efforts to slow the spread of COVID-19. Remember the three most important things you can do to protect yourself and others in the community are masking up, practicing social distance of 6 feet or more, and washing your hands regularly. These fundamental acts of social responsibility will help flatten the curve, keep ourselves and our neighbors healthy, and keep our businesses open. Importantly, these measures show support for frontline and essential workers that serve us daily. If you wish to make public comment during the meeting, there are two ways to do so. Number one, if you joined the webinar on a computer or similar device, click the raise hand icon when the commission is discussing the agenda item on which you would like to speak. When it is time for public comment on that item, the clerk will unmute you. You will have 2 minutes to comment. If you did not log on to the webinar, you may join the meeting by phone. Call the number at the bottom of the screen, enter meeting ID also at the bottom of the screen. Press *9 on your phone when the commission is discussing the agenda item on which you would like to speak. Dialing *9 will let the clerk know that you would like to speak. When it is time for public comment on that item, the clerk will unmute you. You will hear a prompt to indicate that your phone is unmuted. You will have 2 minutes on that item. And now we will call this meeting to order. Can we begin with a roll call?
Yeah, Commissioner Figueroa.
Present.
Commissioner Hcd. Present. Here. Commissioner White.
Present. Commissioner
Barstow.
Here.
Vice Chair Mayer.
Here.
Chair Tagney.
Here.
And I'll note for the record that Commissioner Davies is absent.
Thank you. We can move on now to oral communications. Director Loya, do we have any public comment that should be read before we start?
We have no public in attendance tonight.
Okay. And that takes us on to the consent calendar. I did not see any minutes from our last meeting. Did I miss them, or are they just not included on consent calendar?
No, they should be included. We have the minutes from the January 26th meeting, but not the ones from the very last meeting, it looks like.
Okay. So if we have a motion on that consent calendar.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Do we have a second on that?
I'll second that.
So we have a motion and a second. Director Loya, would you like to do a roll call vote on that?
Sure. Commissioner Figueroa.
Aye.
Commissioner Hcd.
Aye.
Commissioner White.
Aye.
Commissioner Barstow.
Aye.
Vice Chair Mayer.
Yes.
And Chair Tagney.
Yes. Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. So our next item is a general plan APR update. And Director Loya, can you just point out to us what you're looking for on this? Is it just informational and discussion?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to kick the staff report off, and we do have a presentation that Senior Planner Freitas and Deputy Director Dart will assist with. But what we're asking for tonight is for you to make a recommendation to the City Council that they approve this general plan APR. Dila is going to get into a little bit more detail about why we're doing this, but it is primarily an informational. We're going to convey some information to you. Certainly, if there's discussion or changes you want to make before submitting this to the City Council with a recommendation, we'd be pleased to accept that feedback. We do have a couple of minor changes that we'd like to make ourselves, and I'll get to those when we get to the actual presentation. But we have both the housing element annual performance report that we'll present to you tonight, as well as the remainder of the general plan annual performance report.
Okay, take it away. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I am going to turn this over to Senior Planner Freitas, and she, I believe, has a presentation to share.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to go through the sharing of the screens, hopefully without any drama here. Okay, can you all see my presentation? Great. Okay, well, it's really nice to be back with you all. I feel like I haven't seen you in a very long time, so I hope this finds you all well. And this is going to be pretty informal, and we're going to kind of pass it between staff. So feel free to jump in with questions. We can't really get into deliberation during the report, but if something isn't making sense or you want me to, slow down or back up, definitely feel free to stop me at any time. So I'm going to start just really high level, and then we'll pass it between Jen and I, and David will finish us out with some real kind of more specifics of what the report entails this year. But I wanted to start us out with, why are we bringing this to you? What's the purpose of an annual progress report, and how can we use it? So really the intent of an annual progress report is for transparency with the public, and really make a clear tie between the priorities outlined in our long-range planning documents and the on-the-ground decision-making that we do every day. And this really is kind of one of those classic examples of the legislature helping us help ourselves by basically requiring us to annually come back to our work and really connect the dots between our adopted policy and implementation programs and the work that we've done. So there is a new requirement from the legislature for every jurisdiction in the state to submit a formal general plan annual progress report as of last year. Before, it used to be optional. We still have an annual planning survey that the Office of Planning Research also requires, that Joe Mateer has been filling out for many years, but we now have this other standalone annual progress report to submit in addition to the housing element annual progress report, which we've been doing for years and years as well. So the real difference between the general plan annual progress report and the housing element progress report is that the housing element is sort of the more regimented and rigorous report with the most clear intent, which is housing creation. And every year we need to report on how we're doing in creating new units of housing in the city. The general plan progress report, even though it's required, there still aren't any really strict guidelines about the format. So we kind of experimented this year. It's not clear if next year it'll come to you in the exact same format that it did this year. But what was recommended from the Office of Planning and Research is to, not necessarily make it a ton of content, new content, but work with what you already have, if that's the State of the City report or other budget reports, information that maybe is already being prepared, but really make a clear tie back to your adopted policy in that document. So any just questions so far on any of that background? No, okay. So one final point on this before I let Jen talk about the housing element.
Go ahead, Judy. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I guess my question is that in the material that we got in our packets, it doesn't appear that we have a separate document for that housing report.
The housing element report, yeah. So
I'm wondering if there's.
Do you want me to answer that, Dilo?
Sure.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering.
Yeah, I can address
if there's
that.
something to read for that.
So there is actually a summary in the APR that Dilo attached of the data that's going to be submitted for our housing element. There's and I can't, Dilo, maybe you have it off the top of your head, the page number that it's on in our packet, but there is a summary
Well,
Oh, Julie's nodding her head, so she's seeing it.
the table, I don't know if
It's on packet page 23.
Thanks, David.
okay.
And again, that's just a very small snapshot of really the meat and potatoes of what the housing element report is meant to do. But as Jen, I'm sure will tell you, there is a lot more to it. And Jen, do you want to, we were going to get to that a little bit later, but Jen, would you maybe just mind explaining now how that information can be accessed if commissioners are interested in going into more detail on that?
Yeah, no, definitely. That's part of what I was going to discuss in a bit. So the data for the housing element report that we submit is actually all compiled by HCD, so the State Housing and Community Development Department, on their website, and they report on that annually. So you can actually track our progress as we go through. The report that they have us fill out is about 7 different tabs of information with multiple different data points, and it's extremely complex and very confusing. And I felt like it would be better to just share the actual bottom line data with everyone that makes a bit more sense. And so Dilo's going to share a spreadsheet that's similar to the one that's in your packet, and we can talk about it more in detail if you want. But there's all kinds of different data points that HCD requires us track. So from a project application all the way through to the certificate of occupancy. And so that can be tracked over multiple years, and it can be a really complex set of data that we just felt like it would be easier to present in this particular manner in this way.
And to add to that, it's not really in a form that is easily digestible in this format. We can certainly provide those spreadsheets in a future meeting if that's of interest to you to go back and look at those data. But again, the point of the APR, we kind of added to this APR the housing element information just to be able to speak to the progress that we've made on that. And that high level data is what was most important, we thought, at this level.
Can I just ask if at some point you would please provide the Planning Commission with maybe a URL link to that, someplace that we can get access to it?
Absolutely.
Okay. I think especially if we're going to be asked to recommend that the City Council adopt it and send it on to HCD, it would be a nice thing for us to actually have access to it.
Yeah, and if there's additional detail that you'd like to see in future APRs, we can, certainly discuss that for next time. As Dilo had mentioned, there's no specific format that HCD has outlined for, for this particular APR. We already pull all of that housing element data together. But as you see walking through this document, it's a little bit higher level. The housing element report is very granular, but we'll certainly provide you a link. And if you want to have that as a future agenda item and get into the minutia, we can do that as well. Again, from the standpoint of what you're recommending to the council, it's just our high level achievements that are reflected in that one table.
I have a quick question. Are we going to revisit this table for later in this discussion?
It's actually the next slide, so yes.
Yes.
Okay, then I'll hold my question.
Okay, any other comments coming in? Chair Tagny, do you see anything else?
No, but I'm not seeing them. Those are going to David, if it's hand raising.
David, does it look like we're good? Okay, so just really quickly to wrap up this sort of overview before we do move on to the RENA table. I think it's important to note that the general plan APR, when I was preparing it, it really stood out to me that infill policy already exists in our current general plan. In 2000, we already were starting to talk about protecting the outer areas of the city, densifying the urban core, and a lot of our land use policy and patterns do speak to that already. which was sort of heartening to see that our task now is to reinforce and enhance existing policy and not start from square one. We've also been hearing it in some of the feedback that we've gotten on the update, which I will also go into later because I couldn't help myself. So we're definitely going to talk about that. And one other thing that I thought was just really heartening to see is that even during COVID-19, the city was not limited to purely operational activities. There was still a lot of really good work being done to move the ball forward on a lot of the long-term priorities and goals of the city. And it also, I think, shows that a lot of the policy that we have, even though it is 20 years old, a lot of it is still good and still really speaks to the community's needs and to the partnerships that we have. So I'm going to turn it over to Jen now to talk a little bit more about the housing element. And then I'm going to kind of bring us in a different direction and talk a little bit about our existing general plan and the update. But David will round us out with some more specific information from this general plan report. So there will be more opportunity to dig into that at the end of this presentation.
Thanks, Dilo. So as we were talking about before, each year staff prepares the Housing Element Annual Progress Report. To be honest, this spreadsheet that you see before you is basically what it looked like when I took it over, I think in 2017. This is about all the information they required. Each year since then, they've added additional data points, and we've asked our building staff to add additional information on their side so that we would be able to track and report this more correctly. So it's gotten more and more detailed. It's gotten more and more accurate, those are two great things. It definitely takes a lot more time to actually prepare that document now than it did back in the day. But this is the information that it actually summarizes. So this is the information that they're really getting at in the way that the state uses or compiles this data is they ask us to use our building permits issued as the metric to track the number of housing units that are developed. So these are building permits issued. Now, like we were just discussing, there's more data on this report. They actually ask for applications that were submitted, but permit not issued during that time period. They also ask for information on certificates of occupancy. So we're tracking multiple sets of data through many times multiple years. So it's a much more complex than this, but this is the data for 2020 as far as our numbers towards our RENA. So this is the important information. HCD requires that housing development be reported broken down into 4 income categories, which I think most of you were pretty familiar with the housing element information that we brought to you before, but those are listed on the left-hand side of the table. And the next column is the RENA allocation. So that's the Regional Housing Needs Analysis allocation. In that third column, you see the number of units that were permitted in the past 2 years. So the one that's in your packet actually breaks this out even further, but this information is for the past 2 years, for 2019 and 2020 reporting. And then you can see that we've already permitted about 34%, approximately 34% of our RENA allocation of very low income housing. Those were primarily from Sorrel Place, which was formerly Isaacson's, the affordable housing project that's currently under construction on 7th Street. All of the units, and I thought this was notable, all of the units designated in the low and moderate income category were accessory dwelling units. So those are all mother-in-law units or ADUs, depending on what you want to call them. So I thought that was notable. It's exciting to see an increase of those in the city. So for 2019, we had 17, and for 2020, we also had 17. So that's a pretty good number, and that's actually more than I think we were even anticipating. Kimberly, I see that you have a question.
I was just wondering if that is a reflection of the new or less restrictive requirements for the dwelling units that have passed. Do you think that has any effect in why we're seeing those numbers go up?
I would say so, definitely. David, I don't know if you want to speak to that at all, but I would definitely say that does have a role in it.
Yeah, I see we're all shaking our heads. I think it's a combination of things. The city of Arcata was actually pretty proactive in helping ADU development prior. So I think that there's kind of a combination of things going on that has helped for sure. The state's loosening of ADU regulations. We've certainly found through that ways to say yes where in prior years we may have had to say no, or you would have had to go through a some more extensive minor use permit design review or something to that effect. But I also think that there's something going on in housing right now that has really generated a lot of interest in development. We have boom in all housing types that's happening right now. So it's part of the story for sure, though.
So then you can look at our one area that it seems that we're not really producing in, and this is consistent, honestly, with our last housing element cycle, and that would be the above moderate income housing. That would include single family homes, townhomes, condos, high-end or luxury apartments. Those would be kind of examples of what would fall into that category. And although we know that there's not a significant amount of land to build single family homes, like subdivisions and that kind of thing, one of the goals of our strategic infill redevelopment program is really to increase development of all housing types. And that would include in that above moderate category as well as affordable in all of the other categories. So I just kind of wanted to highlight that. Again, this is a summary of a much larger, more complex report. And if you'd like to have that brought back, we can also bring that back at a different time. And you can find some additional information about how we've done in the past on the Hcd website, because all of this information they track for all the jurisdictions. And if you want to see how other jurisdictions are doing, you can look at theirs as well. But it is up on the Hcd website on their housing element page. So any other questions before we go on to the next slide?
I have one. Jennifer, what is 16%? Should we be excited about that accomplishment?
I think that at this point in time, it is a good number. I think that we definitely have a lot of work to do, and that's going to be one of the things that we're really trying to push forward with the strategic infill redevelopment program. I'm excited about I think that next year we're going to have an additional 30 some odd units for the Yurok Tribe's 30th Street project under our affordable housing. So I don't know what the mix is specifically there, very low or low, but I'm excited to see that project come into the community. I think that will be a benefit to our numbers. But I'm very excited about the ADUs and the continuing of that. It's really ramped up, and I feel like that's going to continue going forward, especially with the state loosening their restrictions.
And can you remind us the time frame of this allocation?
Yeah.
Is it a 5-year cycle or something?
No, we have actually until 2027 to meet this. So we have 7 more years.
Okay, so in the first 2 years, we've gotten 16% of the goal of being 100%, huh?
Right.
And we have 7 more years, did you say? Sorry.
7 more years. Yep. 2027 is the last reporting period.
All right.
It's basically 12.5% per year is what we'd be targeting for that 8-year period.
So we're a little below that.
A little below that.
Okay.
And there's some critical thresholds, as you recall, from the 2017, 2018 housing bills that we had a presentation on. There's some critical thresholds at 25% and 50% that if we're not meeting those thresholds, then we lose some of our discretionary authority. But I think we're doing a really good job with the long-range planning work we're doing, preparing ourselves for those later years.
Okay, thank you.
Were there any other questions? Okay, Delia, you want to go to the next slide? So another aspect of the housing element report is tracking our progress on implementation measures that we included in the housing element that was adopted in 2019. So here I've identified 8 implementation measures. This isn't all, there's 25 in total, but these 8 implementation measures are related to the strategic infill redevelopment program and the general plan update that we're embarking on. So I wanted to kind of highlight a couple of them. I'm not going to read all of them to you. But number 12 specifically is encouraging mixed use development with both housing and commercial uses. And that would be one of the things that the Gateway plan that we've talked about, the Gateway program, would be vital to. And then Dilo, if you go to the next slide, number 20 is another important one where we evaluate incentive-based regulatory approaches to reduce constraints on residential development. So those are going to be two very big pieces of that puzzle and hopefully lead to additional development. And then lastly, I just wanted to highlight implementation measure 22, which is public engagement. And you'll see that Dilo is going to go into that a little bit more in detail, but it's really, really important to all the work that we're doing in our housing element. And we actually identified it as an implementation measure on its own, because a lot of the work that we're doing really does require a robust public engagement from the community and understanding why we're going in the route that we're going, and getting input from our community. So I think that that's a really important measure, and it's something that we really wanted to highlight here too.
Awesome.
And if I could jump in real quick, just to put a cap on the conversation about housing. Recently, SB 9 was introduced by Atkins, which would essentially eliminate single-family zoning for all intents and purposes. It would expand the density potential for single-family zoning districts. The mayor wrote a letter that was supported by the league that was in opposition to SB 9. But I think that, these more draconian and drastic measures that are occurring at the state level are really a message to locals that if you want to retain control of your housing stock and the development of your communities, it's really important to ensure that, you're meeting these housing goals. I think different people feel differently potentially about eliminating single family zoning, and I do expect that to be a topic of conversation as we move forward with these general plan updates. But it could drastically affect the way that jurisdictions look and feel, as well as the services that they can provide if densification is allowed unchecked.
Okay, any questions on Jen's report before I take it back over?
I don't see any.
Okay, seeing none. So we're going to go off in a slightly different direction now, sort of seeing the spirit and intent of the reports as a chance to kind of circle back around and really get everybody back on the same page about where we've been and where we're going. I'm going to have a short overview again of the strategic infill redevelopment program components. We're at a really exciting stage right now where we're about to select a consultant team to assist with the drafting of some of these updates. So it's a good time to just get this back in everybody's brain. And again, like I said, there will be more time at the end where David's going to dig back into this report. But this is the part that I've been most involved with, and I wanted to give everyone an update on it. So again, part of the strategic infill redevelopment program is targeted updates to the existing general plan. The general plan includes a vision statement, which is just sort of the guiding vision that we're supposed to use to kind of direct the ship every year for a 20-year period as we go through setting policy and implementing policy. And then we have all the various elements of the general plan. Some are required by law, some are ones that we decided that we wanted for ourselves. The strategic infill program will include a new element, which will be an area plan for the Gateway area. And in addition to this work, the city already has been working on updating its local coastal program, and I know the Planning Commission has received reports on that in the past. So just to kind of remind how we're chunking out this work, because there's a lot of it. There are three elements that are really most closely tied to the strategic infill work that we are doing, and those three elements of the general plan are the land use element, the transportation and circulation element, and the public facilities and infrastructure element. So those three elements will likely see the most significant updates and refining of existing policy. There are, though, these other elements that will be updated at the same time. Partially that's just for efficiency's sake, but some of them also do very closely, kind of two sides of the same coin with growth is conservation. So growth management, resource conservation, and open space can sort of be put in thematically in one bucket. Public safety, design, parks and recreation will also see light touch updates as a result of this effort. So I wanted to just really quickly talk about the community vision. We're not going to read this, but you should be able to recognize what it is. This is Arcata's current community vision. And when we as staff went through analysis of what this vision actually entails, we were able to pull out some sort of major thematic pieces. And we have been using these thematic pieces to communicate what we're going to be updating with the public when we've started doing our community engagement. And I know some of you have taken part in some of that, and thank you for being there and for spreading the word. But so the 4 topics that we have been using to communicate the general plan and how it impacts the look and feel of the city are these 4 main topic areas. One is growth and development. A second is neighborhoods. We also added urban form to that, as it will come up with the Gateway Area Plan. Environment and sustainability, and community and health. And like I said, we've used this to sort of frame out the updates to the public, and we're trying to make it a little bit more understandable to the average person. And we've also used this as sort of a loose format for the general plan annual progress report for this year. And like I said, it might not always be that way, but it just was a way to sort of keep using the same thematic language that we've been using with the public in this form as well. So if you haven't seen the community vision statement, if you are wanting to revisit some of the things that we're talking about, I definitely would suggest you visit the strategic infill page on the city's website. This is a great resource for all of the work that we've been doing. It has summaries of the December 17th and February 25th town hall meetings that we've had, where we've dug into some of these topics. You can find very detailed summaries as well as recordings of those meetings. A little bit of fun extracurricular work for the commissioners. And finally, just wanted to talk a little bit about what we've heard and how we plan to continue to capture information from the public. Some of the main themes we've heard so far, really do align with what we heard back in 2000, but there are some new things coming out as well. Connections with Humboldt State University is always a really important thing to people that we have spoken to. Aiming for more diverse representation in the communities that we're engaging has also really come out as a main theme, making sure that we are hearing not only from the usual suspects, quote unquote, but new people that might not be well represented yet in our planning and our policy. Climate change and sea level rise, incorporation of art, have been big as well, including more investment in Valley West. We've heard that consistently throughout the work that we've been doing so far, as well as prioritizing infill and density in the urban core. Obviously, that's what we are planning to do. That's what the old general plan focused on, but we are still continually hearing that from people as their priority. So that's good to know that not only are we planning for it, but it's actually built on community support. So those are some themes that we have heard, and we are going to continue to try and find creative ways to reach folks that aren't coming to the meetings, aren't able to come to the meetings, don't know that they're happening, including trying to get more information out into the world, more surveys, more town halls, and more targeted outreach to people who we have not really heard from yet, including more work with Humboldt State University. And I'm going to turn it back to David to kind of get us back on track with the work that's in our current general plan.
Elo, I think Kimberly had a question.
Oh, okay.
Before you move on.
Yeah, I was just going to comment that you guys are doing a really good job and also reaching the Latinx community in your outreach. So I just wanted to mention.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. And that's one really good point that I'll make really quickly before turning it over to David, is that even though it's really challenging, obviously, to do robust community outreach during a global pandemic, there also have been some sort of lucky breaks for us in the fact that there is a lot of community organizing going on outside of the city HSU just did its 5-year update visioning, and they're totally happy to share that data with us. And also we have 3 new council members who just joined, and they did quite a bit of canvassing, and they're also very excited to share what they've heard. So even though we can't reach everybody through the work that we do 9 to 5, there are a lot of other people that are very engaged and very passionate and very excited to share their ideas with us. So we're feeling lucky in that sense, at least, if nothing else. So yeah, that's what I have for you. Thank you for receiving my report.
Thanks, Dila. You want to go to the next slide, please? Or, I'm sorry, allow me to share my screen is what I meant to say. So these are the topics we're going to talk about next. Okay, great. I did want to just share with you real quick how to get to the Hcd reports. I guess, again, one of the silver linings to COVID is that we can do this kind of stuff on the fly. If you Google Hcd housing element, your top pick is going to be this one. If you go into this, there's lots, you can research what housing elements are out there. Annual progress reports will take you to the current list of progress reports and the data that's been submitted in past years. And once we submit our data this April for the 2019-2020, it'll be uploaded there as well. So I did want to just share that with you before we moved on from that topic real quick. So again, Google Hcd housing element and you'll get right there. Okay. I also wanted to share with you the report itself. You have this in your packet, and so you can move along with us. But again, this is the first time we've presented this, so I just wanted to orient you real quick to the report. And if there's any discussion or changes that the Planning Commission wants to make, we're happy to entertain those. So this was a format borrowed from the state, but essentially Section 1 goes through the existing general plan, and as Dilo had mentioned, we structured these around those buckets that she described, or those frameworks for how to collapse the elements. And we talked about the programs that we've implemented or the work that we're doing and how those relate to the various elements underneath. Section 2 describes the housing element report requirements, and again, it only hits that high level that we discussed in the meeting tonight. Slightly more detail, but it's super high level compared to the actual housing element APR. Section 3 does some comparison with OPR's guidance. And Section 4 is the last update to the general plan, information around that. We also report on these with OPR's annual survey of jurisdictions as well. And then Section 5 gets to the goals, policies, objectives, and standards. So under Section 1, and here's the first place where I'd like to add an amendment. In this last sentence, we talk about the 4 areas here, but we only listed 3. So we wanted to add health and community services to this list, and we'll be doing that with your approval. But we talk about these in these various buckets. And so the way that it's structured under neighborhoods and urban form, for example, we're talking about some of the work that we are doing to create the form-based code that's part of this upcoming planning work, which is actually a revision or a new addition to our general plan. Will be part of a restructuring and revision of the general plan overall. In talking about these programs, including our strategic arts plan, we then go on to identify the general plan policy that's covered by that body of work. And so we're trying to relate, not in a real explicit way, like the housing element APR does, where we're connecting dots between specific projects and the implementation of these tasks, but more in generalities how these relate to these implementing these policies. I will note that in the future, yes, Commissioner Visay-Delcock.
So right there where you're on the historic preservation element, you referenced the Historic and Design Review Committee. Is that correct? Should it be the Historic Landmark? Because that's been disbanded, right?
That's correct. That's a good catch. We're pulling the language from the existing, and so some of the language hasn't caught up with our current structure.
Okay.
And so it wasn't even a committee. If it was extant, it would be a commission. So we do have some amendments that we'll be doing as we go through this next process. But that's a good catch. But we do have a lot of really exciting work going on to implement the historic and design element, including rapid assessment surveys that we had talked about when we were going through the process of decommissioning the Historic and Design Review Commission. So that work is ongoing.
Hey, David, do you mind if people
this
jump?
section?
Judith,
Please just jump in. Yeah, I may not see your hand.
You're muted, Judith.
Is there another question?
With all these screens open, I'm trying to unmute myself without closing the meeting down. So sorry about that.
It's a Zoom world.
It is. On the historic preservation policies and sections, I think it's packet page 10. Is there anything to note over the past year with regard to what goes on the plaza with the removal of the McKinley statue and the new signage? That was sort of pending last year, and because that stuff is mentioned in the general plan, it might be helpful to at least make reference to it in this report, even if nothing has actually happened over the last year. Is there?
That's a good point. We did amend that section of the general plan, and so it no longer discusses the McKinley statue in the current general plan.
Right,
but identifying.
Yeah, just mentioning something in there in that section could be an important little addition.
We can absolutely do that. I think that's a good point to talk about. Some of the general plan updates that have been processed, including that one specifically. And to your broader question about what else has been going on, we have been working through. Deal has been largely leading the effort with a couple of interns actually, to bring forward some of the mitigation that was identified in the McKinley project. We're also working with the tribes to discuss appropriate response to their concerns, as well as the Historic Landmarks Committee. And I do think that sometime in this calendar year, we'll have a clear path on that. The next section I wanted to identify, we use this sort of highlighting this blue to reflect sections headings. And I just wanted to ask that we dump this transportation circulation section in toto into the growth and development section, so that we can stay consistent with the 4 buckets that we had been talking about. And again, I'm not going to go through each of these individually, but we are working on several projects that relate to implementing the transportation and circulation elements. Environmental sustainability, obviously, as Dilo had mentioned, this is a main theme that's coming out of our work with the community right now. Several projects listed under here. And I think climate adaptation is going to be one of the bigger challenges moving forward under sustainability and environmental. Growth and development. A lot of the work that we're doing right now obviously is going to impact this, but we do note some of the big notables that were identified in our General Plan 2020 that did occur over the last year. One is the Creekside annexation. This also related to transportation, and that the Foster Avenue extension was identified in that General Plan 2020 as well, which was also a part of the connection related to the Creekside. And then lastly, community services and health. This was a theme that was, yeah, go ahead, Commissioner, Vice Chair Mayor.
Yeah, in the growth and development section, and I believe that we've talked about this before, but not in one of these meetings. You do refer to the Creekside Homes development. That's the first item on page 10. And on page 12, there's also specific reference to the growth management element policy on the city's annexation procedures. And seeing as how a progress report represents steps forward, but may also represent inadequacies of the plan or a few steps back, possibly. Since you did mention the Creekside plan, it has sort of highlighted some serious problems with the city's annexation process in dealing with LAFCO, in that whereas the city and the developer had asked for a small amount of land, a small area to be annexed to the city of Arcata to enable the Creekside project to go forward, LAFCO returned with an area 3 times that size in its annexation recommendation, which also constitutes an approval. There are no policies in our general plan that address the possibility that LAFCO would, in effect, force the city to annex land that the city has not requested to be annexed, nor have any landowners or neighbors requested, and that my understanding is the city doesn't really want. So I think that somewhere in this report, it would be important to address the fact that our general plan has run into a glitch with respect to that annexation process. And, I'm not sure how you want to do that, but this may be an opportunity to also bring to the attention of both the City Council and LAFCO that we have a problem with this. I know I have a problem with it as a planning commissioner for having agreed to the trust me approach in this approval, and now find that I wonder if I would have approved that project if I had known that that small annexation request would turn into a Trojan horse for LAFCO to respond to in the way that it did. LAFCO's procedures call on LAFCO to get cities to annex areas that are surrounded by development on 3 sides. But our general plan and our annexation procedures don't really anticipate that LAFCO is going to use an annexation request to expand the city by an additional 40 acres beyond what we requested. Is there any way that this report can acknowledge that there's a problem there?
Well, I think that, I understand you've characterized it as a problem and, a glitch with the general plan. I'm not sure I would characterize it that way. Certainly it's up to the Planning Commission to, have those deliberations. I guess before moving forward with that position, I would really encourage the Planning Commission to ask for, a more detailed report on, what the, particulars of, LAFCO's process are, and, certainly what their particular deliberative process looks like outside of the cities, before characterizing it as such in this report. So I suppose that's up to the commission to discuss. I'm not going to get into government code unless there's a desire of the commission to really dig into this in any kind of detail. And I think what I would what I would advise in particular, because this is a borders on a policy matter with how the two agencies interact. And as a policy matter, it's particularly the purview of the city council, that if the commission does ultimately wish to make such a statement in this, that you forward the recommendation that this be adopted in its form, and that the city council consider some sort of study session to discuss that matter. I don't see that it's hypercritical that issue be resolved before we submit this APR, but again, it's up to the Planning Commission to have those deliberations.
Yeah, I'm not asking that the issue be resolved. I'm asking that this report note that there is an issue, and I think
again, I think it's really a policy decision, and I think it's up to the Planning Commission to have that deliberation. I would strongly encourage you to forward the report as it's written without that content, but ask that the City Council consider whether they wish to, address that in this form or not.
All right, then I'd like to request formally that get onto the Planning Commission's agenda for a future meeting, and I hope that it will be very soon. And I realize that the period during which the city of Arcata could have objected, or the Planning Commission could have asked that the City Council object, has passed. We had 2 canceled meetings at which that might have been put on the agenda, but since we didn't meet, it couldn't have come up. And I would like to ask here that it does appear on a future agenda.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Commissioner Sade-Elcock, were you getting ready to weigh in?
Yeah, I completely agree with Judith, and I'm so glad that she brought this up. It would be nice at some point if we could almost have a study session so that we know, or maybe educate ourselves about LAPCO and how they operate. I was completely taken by surprise, and I feel like if we had a little more education, maybe we would have known. But for future use, we do need to sit down and have a meeting just about this LAPCO at some point and how they do annexations.
I'd like to also request, if it goes on the agenda, that the city actually consider a moratorium on new annexation requests until we have addressed this issue. Because if we're going to request an annexation in order to approve a development permit, and then find that the annexation that we've requested is far from the annexation that LAPCO approves, I think that we are misleading the public, applicants, and allowing development in our boundaries to take a course that the Planning Commission and the City Council may not have expected in approving particular projects. So that's what I'd like to see on an agenda for our discussion in the future.
So procedurally, and this is a question to city staff, if we make a request to put this on a future agenda, is this something we would handle at this point in the presentation, or would you like to move forward with the presentation and then we revisit this after we've completed?
Well, certainly I think what I'm hearing is that, folks, a couple of commissioners would like to discuss it. If you want to take a straw poll real quick, we can schedule it for an upcoming agenda. If you wanted to try and schedule a study session with the City Council to have a discussion, that would take a little more time to plan for, but I'd be happy to bring this back to your next regularly scheduled Planning Commission meeting. I certainly think before we start leveling accusations about partner agencies, that we need to understand in more detail what those different roles and responsibilities are.
I like the idea of it coming up at a meeting as soon as possible, and you're saying that could be even our next regularly scheduled meeting. Is that correct?
I'd be happy to bring it back at your next regularly scheduled meeting. The one request I would make is that I check in with LAFCO staff. I think it would be important for them to be able to present if they wish to, so that they can speak, to their policies and procedures. What I can tell you is that their policies, which maybe some of you have read recently, due to the controversy in the community around this annexation expansion, those all fall directly from government code. And they are a separate, independent, body that makes discretionary decisions just like you do. And oftentimes a referral committee, or when we had the Historic Design Review Commission, would make recommendations to you as a superior body, or as a body that had approval authority that was beyond that initial body. You oftentimes made different decisions. Similarly, you'll make recommendations to the City Council, and sometimes they make different decisions than you had recommended. And so this is part and parcel for the deliberative process and the decision-making process for, for these types of decisions. And so I think that, having the LAFCO staff there to answer any questions that you have specifically about their process and would be worth waiting for if they're interested in attending. Otherwise, I'd be happy to bring back at our next meeting, review of the government code that authorizes LAFCO and their enacting legislation.
That would be helpful, but it doesn't. I think it will let them explain what they did, but it will not really focus our attention on the disconnect between the city's policies and LAFCO's policies, and the fact that any annexation request, it appears, could open the door for LAFCO to approve something fairly quite different from what has been requested of them. So
that is true.
Giving our platform for deliberation over to LAFCO will not really take care of this problem, but identifying it as a problem in the language of our general plan and a disconnect with LAFCO's requirements, I think is an important step in getting some attention to this. So I would like to request an addition to this report, recognizing that there's an issue.
And Judy, you're saying you'd like that?
Commissioner White. Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to clarify that the report deadline for this is April 1st. Is that correct?
It is.
So I'm wondering if there can be an addendum and at least get this report in, and perhaps at a later meeting discuss how that language might look like. Do we actually need to address that now? Are there penalties if we don't do this? What are the repercussions if we're late?
I'm not.
There are really no repercussions.
I'm not asking for anything that would cause this report to be late. I'm asking for the note about the progress in terms of growth and development and annexation, to note that we have something in our general plan which has produced a result in interaction with LAFCO that was in no way foreseen by either this commission or the city council, and apparently by staff either, and that we probably need to address that in the future.
I actually and I don't want to dwell on this matter, it's not the point of this meeting, but we did discuss this explicitly at one hearing when we were discussing the Creekside annexation, because the LAFCO staff had early on supported a recommendation by the Humboldt County Public Works Department that the city expand its annexation footprint to include the entirety of Foster Avenue. And so we explicitly discussed the potential of that. at that meeting and explicitly rejected it. And that's part of the city's current argument to the LAFCO Commission as part of the reconsideration hearing that they're undertaking on the 17th. And it's also part of the original presentation that I made to the LAFCO Commission in my appeal to them not to expand the annexation footprint when they took the original action. And so I don't want to characterize that this was a surprise to anyone. I think we knew it from the start.
Okay, and if you could send us some information about the reconsideration hearing on the 17th, that would be very helpful. Because the Planning Commission obviously didn't meet between the time the LAFCO decision came out and now. That would be helpful. Thank you.
In the interest of time, why don't we do a straw poll to see if the commission would like to have a hearing specific to the LAFCO decision-making process on such items? Can we just do raising hands? Is that good enough for staff? So let's just show hands if you would like to have that meeting at as soon as possible on one agendize as soon as possible. Hands up if you want to see that. Okay. I see 1, 2, 3.
Commission. Okay, so 4. We have a total of 4: Commissioner Vasade-Elcock, Commissioner Figueroa, Commissioner Chair, Vice Chair, Mayor, and Chair Tagney.
Yes. Okay.
We will bring that back.
Thank you. And Judith, do you feel heard enough? Do you are you comfortable with that based on what David's answer was to you a minute ago about the communication with LAFCO throughout the hearing process?
Yeah, and I think that whatever happens at the reconsideration hearing will obviously tell us more about what our concerns with the city's own policies need to be. But the idea that any annexation process could open the possibility for something very different than what that process deliberated over is a concern to me as a planning
rightly
commissioner.
so. It's transparency. It doesn't reflect well on us to the public that are sometimes fighting these projects. So we have direction. Is everybody comfortable now getting back to the staff report? Have we done enough here to move on? Okay, thank you. Thank you all. City staff?
Okay, I guess I'll just kind of close by asking if there are any other items that folks wanted to discuss. I can bring the report back up and look at any particular language that you'd like. Okay, I'm not seeing any. That concludes our staff report. What we're asking for is a recommendation to the City Council by vote of the Commission, starting with a motion, and we'll make those 2 amendments that we had discussed to relocate the transportation circulation under growth and development, and to add health and community services to the first paragraph identifying the 4 buckets.
Would any note about the need to address that disjoint between our annexation policies and LAFCO's policies be included in those changes?
I have not heard a formal decision at the Planning Commission to make that. I think that, again, from staff's perspective, and I will advise the council to this as well, and at that point we'll have the city attorney's recommendation that before identifying this as a problem and characterizing it that way, in a public document that, goes to the state and gets forever embedded in the public record, that we have a little more understanding about what the roles and responsibilities are. I do not think that this process reflects poorly on the city of Arcata and our transparency. It really reflects on the LAFCO process. We've been completely transparent the entire time, working with the community to identify.
Yeah, I'm not saying anything about the city's
So
deficiencies. I'm saying that if we're looking at progress in implementing and reconsidering aspects of the general plan, that this is something that the city should direct its attention to. And it does seem that we've had agreement by at least some of the planning commissioners that it has posed a problem.
If
my
I may,
understanding was
really
that the
quickly,
majority of planning commissioners, excuse me for a second, Dilo. My understanding is that the majority of planning commissioners wish to have an agenda item at the upcoming planning commission meeting to discuss the item further and to get more information. If you want to take another straw poll to include that as an amendment to this report, I think that that would clarify it for staff. So specifically to include some language, which I'd like to hear the specific language, have that motion with a straw poll, I think would be very helpful for staff in updating this report if it's needed.
Milo, did you have something to say?
yes, I just wanted to, one other way of saying what David was just saying is it is likely that regardless of the way we frame our policy in the growth management element or other elements, state law is state law, LAFCO functions as LAFCO functions, we submit, and they may change the boundary that we propose regardless of our process. So that is sort of the heart, I believe, of what David's point is there may not be a glitch in our policy. It may just be that LAFCO state law would trump that, if you will. Just wanted to clarify that before we took a vote.
Julie?
Oh, hi. Yeah, Lily, I completely agree with Judith. I'm upset about the way it was handled. I didn't think it was correct. And we need to take part of the blame. We didn't understand how annexations work, how LAFCO works, but I don't think it's necessarily appropriate to put this, it feels like a grievance, like we're using the APR as a grievance against LAFCO, and I don't think it's the appropriate place to put that. So I would not like this put in the APR, this grievance, because that's what it feels like. But in the meantime, I definitely think we need to learn more, and I would like to have somebody from LAFCO come and answer our questions, but we need to study this more so this doesn't happen again. That's my opinion.
Thank you. And John?
Yeah, I was going to say pretty much the same thing that Julie just said. I don't think this report is the appropriate vehicle for making this concern known, although it definitely seems like a valid concern. And I think we need to learn more about how LAFCO works.
I just wanted to clarify my position on this as well. I wasn't present during this annexation procedure, and I'm just unaware. I just need to get some more information regarding the process, what we did. I just get caught up with everybody, and unfortunately, I actually won't be present for the next meeting. So just to make everyone aware in regards to that. But yeah, there's a lot to learn, a lot to understand. I just wanted to state that.
Kimberly, do you have anything you'd like to say at this point?
I guess if we're ready for a motion, I could do that.
Okay. It feels as though on a straw poll situation, Judith, that your point has been well made to the commission, but I don't get the sense that the numbers are there to forward any kind of a complaint or suggestion of redoing things. However, there was a majority that wants to be more educated about LAFCO's process. It feels like once you open the can of worms that you don't know where LAFCO is going to go with it, and that's a little uncomfortable. So any future annexations are going to be immensely more scrutinized after this experience, I think, for all of us. So it would be great to hear from LAFCO.
Yeah, I agree. And it does appear that we'll address this in one way or another in the future.
Yeah.
I would like to point out that staff's response to this request appears, it sort of makes me feel like modifications that staff wants to make to a report that they've asked us to review are acceptable. Modifications that we suggest are not being seriously entertained. And there we are.
Okay, well, I did forget to mention one amendment that was brought up by the commission was to add the piece about amendments to the McKinley statute. And so if the commission so chooses to add those, then we'd love to incorporate those as well.
Do you need a vote on that?
Yeah, a motion and a vote would be great.
Okay. Let's do that right now. Can we have a motion, Judith? Would you like to make it as it was your idea?
Sure. I guess updating the motion to approve the report with the two reorganization matters that staff has suggested, along with a note about the historic resources and McKinley statue removal and future plaza development, something like that. That we approved the annual general plan progress report.
Thank you. Do we have a second on that motion?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Director Loya, will you do a roll call vote, please?
Oh, was that Commissioner White that seconded?
Yes, it was.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Sadel-Cock? Commissioner Barstow, we got a thumbs up. Commissioner Barstow?
Yes.
Commissioner Figueroa?
Aye.
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Vice Chair Mayor?
Aye.
And Chair Tagney?
Aye. Well, thank you, staff, for that wonderful report. And we know that thousands of hours go into these things, and we discuss it for about 1 hour. And there's a lot
Do
more
we
to
need a
say.
motion? Do we need a motion, Dan?
I think we just moved and approved a motion on, yeah, I think we're done with that part.
I thought that was just to add McKinley. Was that for the whole thing?
The way she
That's
worded
fine
it
with
was
me.
the
I
whole
just
thing.
didn't
Yeah,
know.
that was
Okay.
for the whole thing, the way I
Okay.
intended it.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Moving on. I think we're to communications. Staff and commission communication. Oh, Julie, sorry.
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions for you, David, or maybe Dilo. So rewinding back to regarding the public facilities, I just wonder how the city is going to deal with the Arcata Land Company, the CMIS property, the wheat products, Park Meadow Estates, those grows, and all the possible impacts those are going to have on our wastewater collection system. Did you hear me?
Can certainly take a look at that and bring that back to the commission.
Yeah, it seems like it'll have a pretty big impact. And I just wanted to know how that would fit into what we've just been discussing all night.
Is that include the floral farm? Is that the project you're talking about?
Yeah, all 4 really big grows that are all in that same area, similar area. And they're pretty big. I'm just wondering how that's going to affect our, our wastewater collection system.
Yeah. Judith?
We'll come back.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we could, in addition to looking at the wastewater collection system, I know there's some concerns also about groundwater in that area, because it does seem, even though that's outside the city limits, part of the Arcata Land Company project intends to be using city water, but part of their water supply appears to be coming from groundwater, which could in turn affect water tables within the city limits as well. So there are two areas in terms of water supply and groundwater where the city of Arcata may actually have an interest in that project or those projects cumulatively, that puts it possibly within an area where the city or the planning commission and the city council may want to weigh in. So yeah, groundwater and city water supply may also be issues.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Commissioner White had her hand.
Oh, thank you. Go ahead.
It's okay. I lost it.
Okay. And, we're on correspondence and communications, basically. So if there's any other correspondence or communications from staff or commission, now's your time.
If no other commissioners have any items, I have one.
Okay, please.
Okay, I'm seeing none. So super exciting news. The city's strategic infill redevelopment program request for proposals went out in January. The date for submittals closed, and we've been reviewing those responses. Super jazzed about the responses that we've received, and we're anticipating having the award at the City Council on April 7th. And so we'll have those available for you for your review shortly after council makes appointment. And we're looking forward to getting started on that body of work. Had two really great proposals, so we're happy with the progress we're making on that.
That's great.
Dilo, can you talk a little bit about the upcoming events if you have dates for them or estimated timeframes?
Well, we don't have any more meetings scheduled with a date. We will be working with a new group in Valley West called CUNA. They represent the Latinx community in Valley West, to support them in undertaking empathy interviews, one-on-one interviews with people, and we're going to be asking more visioning questions probably throughout April, I would assume. And we will also be working on surveys to release related to the vision statement as well. My understanding is we're going to break up the general plan elements into sort of the more heavy hitter elements, as I outlined: the land use, infrastructure, circulation, and then all the rest into 2 separate deliverable dates, with the ones that require less updates coming first. So that will likely be in the summer, and then the rest will come in September. So I know that's pretty high level, but that is sort of how we're planning to break up the large workload that will be coming at you. So you likely will be seeing the engagement on some of the less intensive pieces come before you first. Our strategy will mostly be to provide draft documents for review and comment once we get into the actual specific topic areas.
Okay. Anything else from anybody? Okay, I hope you all get vaccinated and stay healthy. Good night.
All right, thank you, everyone.